Good morning, everybody. My name is Dustin Morse with the City of Cibolo. Thank you so much for joining us today for this week's installment of the Thirsty for Knowledge Free Business Law Summer Series. I wanted to just let everybody know ahead of time that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with any participant who registered. It'll be sent to your email. A edited version will be uploaded to the Cibolo Economic Development YouTube channel, as well as shared on all social media platforms as well that the Cibolo Economic Development Department has. So with that out of the way, we do also have the chat feature enabled. So if anyone in Eventbrite who is watching this right now would like to submit any questions, I will put them in the chat box for our guest speaker, Adelita Cavada, to respond to. But with that being said, I would like to give a warm welcome to Ms. Adelita Cavada. She is an attorney with her own legal firm, Adelita Cavada Law, and she is doing a wonderful presentation for us today. So with that being said, Adelita, it is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Real quick before I just jump into the presentation. I am an attorney, but me giving this presentation, please don't anyone assume that there's some sort of attorney-client privilege that is created or that I am your attorney. I am always available for questions, so please feel free to ask. So with that, this week's topic is how divorce can impact your business, right? We all think we're going to be together forever. No one gets married with the expectation of divorce. Sometimes even some planning. Pre-marriage tends to hurt people's feelings, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, right? But the reality is this is something that we should keep in mind when we have a business, when we start a business, or when we get married and we already have a business. So first, I'm going to go through what is divorce, right? It's the legal dissolution of a marriage by a court. Why is this important? There, you have a neutral third party deciding on what's a fair separation of the assets between two people. There are two kinds of marriages. There's formal marriage, and we all know what that is. We get married before a person's licensed to perform marriages. So a minister, a justice of the peace, a judge. Now in Texas, the county clerk can marry you, right? And then there's informal, which people think of as common law. And I ask here, are you a lawyer, right? Probably not, right? So don't assume that you know what an informal marriage is or a common law marriage is. There's a lot of rules surrounding common law marriage, and none of it has how long you guys live together. That's not one of them, right? The rules of thumb that you've heard about what constitutes a common law marriage are wrong. And I say that with 100% certainty, right? So if you ever find yourself in this situation, talk to a lawyer about either formalizing your relationship or not, or talk to a lawyer about how to make sure no one ever mistakes you for married. Right. The rules around common law divorces are really funky. Either it's a breakup and you two go your separate ways, or you file for divorce if you think you were really married. You have 2 years from the date that you break up to do it, or by operation of law, y'all were never married, right? So don't complicate things for yourself. Don't hold yourself out to be married if you're not married, right? Get yourself formally married if you actually want to be married, right? So, is my business property, right? Absolutely. Your business is an asset of your marital estate, period. And I'm going to get into some different rules about when it might not be or how we can pull it out of the marital estate. But your business is a piece of property. The value your business has is a piece of property, right? So we're going to talk about that. But don't ever think, well, it was my business. I had it before we were married, or I'm the only one who works in the business. It doesn't quite work that way, right? A business is property. So whose is it? Is it yours or is it theirs, right? So first, you should know that you may not need to take any additional steps to protect your business assets in the case of a divorce, if those business assets are likely to be classified as separate property, right? And there's a difference between separate property and community property. Just because you're married does not mean that everything you own is now, jointly owned between the two of you, right? Texas is a community property state. which means that generally only community property will be divided and separate property will not be divided. So what's the difference between the two? Under the Texas Family Code, community property consists of the property other than separate property acquired by either spouse during the marriage. And that's kind of the key, right? Acquired by either spouse during the marriage is community property, but not always, right? Separate property is anything owned by the spouse prior to the marriage. So, or if either one of you acquired a piece of property by a gift or by inheritance, right? So my sister gives me a car as a gift while I'm married. That car is now mine, and it's my separate property, separate from the community property with my husband. If my mother were to pass away and she passes down, she gives me a valuable piece of artwork and $100,000, right? That artwork and that cash are now my separate property, and my husband would have no interest in it at all. In the case of a divorce, a judge can't even look at that property to separate it, right? Because it's not community property, the judge can't separate it, right? And then there's a personal injury recovery from a lawsuit, right? So personal injury recoveries belong to the person and not the community, right? So those are some different roles on maybe kind of seeing the difference between the community property and separate property in a marriage. Now, the separate property, right, can include your business, right? So in other words, if you acquired your business or you started your business or you inherited your business or whatever, right, prior to getting married, or if you inherited that business during your marriage, so long as your property has not become commingled, you may not need to take any additional steps to protect those assets, since they will not be subject to division by a judge, right? But there's some things to consider, right? Did you get it before getting married? Did you inherit it? Did you guys commingle any of your businesses? And did either of you start working for the other, right? So then what can you do, right? What do you do if you're already married, right? And you want to make sure your business is protected, right? The first thing, right, is before we even get married is get a prenup, right? And a prenuptial agreement is an agreement made by a couple before they're married concerning the ownership of their respective assets should the marriage fail, right? This can happen to the best of entrepreneurs, right? So while you're a new business owner and you're putting in long hours to build up your business, sometimes the marriage can falter, right? And the next thing you know, your spouse could be filing for divorce, right? This happens a lot. 40 to 50% of all first marriages in the US end in divorce. Second and third marriages are even higher. For those whose marriage is in trouble or who are about to get a divorce, there are some strategies that can help preserve your business. But once the divorce proceedings start, you won't be able to implement any strategies or any legal maneuvers to try to save your business or try to keep your business out of the hands of a divorce judge. If you had implemented some of these things during happier times when things are going good, right, it can keep your business from landing in a soon-to-be ex-spouse's possession. A typical scenario would be something like you get married young, no prenup, and you have $100,000 business, right? Something small. But not anticipating that 20 years later, it's now a $5 million business, and your spouse now has some stake in the growth of that business. So who would need a prenup, right? So contrary to everyone's opinion, prenups are not just for the rich, right? Prenups can be used to protect the assets of a wealthy fiance, a couple of more modest means that are increasingly turning to them for their own purposes, right? or I'm sorry, so people of more modest means are turning to prenups to protect themselves in the case of an eventual divorce, not hoping for divorce, not setting your marriage up for divorce, but making sure that you're protected. Right? There are some reasons that regular people could want a prenup, right? So that you can pass separate property to children from prior marriages. A couple that's marrying that have children from prior marriages can use a prenup to spell out what will happen to their property when they die, right? So we can also use it for that, so that you can pass it on to your children and still provide for other necessities, right? Without a prenup, a surviving spouse might have the right to claim a large portion of your property, leaving much less for your kids or kids from a prior marriage. It can also clarify the financial rights between you two, right? Couples with or without children, wealthy or not, can simply want to clarify your financial rights and responsibilities during a marriage. It can help avoid arguments in case of a divorce, right? You may want to avoid potential arguments in case you ever do get divorced by specifying in advance how the property will be divided and whether or not either spouse will receive, any part of the business. And it helps get protection from debts. So prenups can also be used to protect spouses from each other's debts. And they may address a multitude of other issues as well, right? So generally, nobody likes to think about it. And people tend to get offended if one spouse or the other is asking for a prenup, right? But don't be, right? We're adults. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect our businesses for us, our children, for everyone involved in the marriage relationship, right? Including partners. We'll get to that in a little bit. Right? But I love them, right? Divorce can happen to even the strongest relationships, right? You can't affair-proof a marriage. You may grow apart. You're spending all your time growing your business, and it puts a strain on your marriage. And there's other scenarios, there's other stressors when it comes to marriage, right? So nobody likes to think about it, right? But it could happen, right? And even the strongest relationships can sometimes end in divorce. So what happens if you're already married, right? And you don't have a prenup, right? You have a business you want to save, sign a postnuptial agreement, right? As soon as possible. A postnuptial agreement is exactly the same as a prenup, but it's signed after the marriage, right? They're most effective if they're signed long before the parties file for divorce. A postnup entered into right before divorce could be questioned. The best practice is always to do early in the marriage, or of course a prenuptial agreement, right, before you get married. To ensure that your pre or postnuptial agreement can be enforced, it's best that both of you have the agreement reviewed by your own attorneys, right? You can also create a buy-sell operating agreement, a partnership agreement, shareholder agreement with your spouse, right? So if your business is a partnership, an LLC, a corporation, you should have one of these agreements in place that has a provision that defines what's going to happen to the business should any of the owners get divorced. These agreements can require that everyone have a prenuptial agreement that waives their spouse's interest in the business, right? They can limit a spouse's ability to acquire ownership. Let's say in the case of a death, if you're in a partnership or an LLC with multiple members and you pass away, your spouse may not be the best person to step into your shoes and run that part of the business, right? So these kinds of agreements also protect your partners, right? And they make your business, more valuable in the event later on that you want to sell your interest, or all the partners want to sell the business, right? it makes it more valuable, knowing that a spouse can't come in and muck up an agreement or interfere with any of the business. You can deny spouse voting rights, right, in these kinds of agreements. You can prohibit an owner or their estate from transferring or selling ownership interest to third parties without written consent of the other owners. And it can give the business or other owners the mandatory right or right of first refusal to buy the ownership interest from the ex-spouse of an owner, right? So if your ex-spouse or your divorcing spouse now owns a stake in the business, you can have an agreement in place that protects your partners or the other people in your business from that spouse selling it to anybody other than those already in the business, right? Or another strategy is to keep your spouse out of the business, right? So, I'm an attorney. The last thing I want is a non-attorney coming into my business and mucking things up, right? If your spouse is not involved in the business, it's best not to let them start, right? If they're already involved, transition them out as soon as possible. Unless you have a prenup, your spouse's involvement in the business can strengthen the case that they're entitled to a larger portion of the business in the event of a divorce, right? So as the business owner, the outcome is much better for you if your spouse is excluded from the start. I've said it in every presentation that I've given this summer, over and over and over, right? Is we've got to keep our finances separate. Keep good records, right? Keep your personal expenses separate from your business expenses, right? Don't commingle. For example, don't borrow from your home's equity to buy, say, trucks for your business or buy any inventory for your business. You've now commingled, right? A community asset with your business and personal property asset in your business, right? Pay yourself a good salary, right? So if you starve your family's cash flow to build a business, some, smart lawyer might come in and make the case that your ex is entitled to more of the company's assets. So if you paid yourself a salary of $80,000 a year instead of, say, like $300,000 a year, and we're hoping on retirement to sell the business and enjoy the proceeds together, and now that's not happening, your ex will want their share of the company, right? So keep them separate, right? It's very easy to just set yourself up to be paid from the bank account, right? Instead of paying your personal expenses, right? So let's say your air conditioning unit goes out at home or your water heater, and you need $4,000 to get a new one, get it installed, get everything, get it all fixed, right? You have $4,000 sitting in your business account, but not enough sitting in your personal account. Don't pay that expense from your business account. Pay that $4,000 to your personal account, and then pay for that new water heater from your personal account, right? So don't commingle. Always keep them separate, right? And then fire your spouse, right? So if your spouse is actively involved in your business, get them out, right? I said that in the last slide, right? So the more prominent that your spouse has in your business, and the longer they worked in the business, the stronger the case is that a lawyer could say that the spouse helped build your business and should profit from your growth. Okay. You tried and you tried, you went to counseling, you did what you could to save your marriage, but you're still getting divorced, right? Get your business valued by a professional, right? The court can assign your business a value, but don't rely on that, right? Judges aren't usually accountants, right? And judges aren't experts in everything, right? But they do have the authority to place value on things and make determinations of value. by operation of law, right? So don't leave that up to the judge, right? Verify the value with an independent valuation, right? Sacrifice other assets, right? Don't be stupid, right? Protect your business, right? When people get divorced, there's hurt feelings, there's a gotcha attitude, there's a I want to inflict as much hurt as possible. There's an attitude of this is my business, they did nothing, were nothing without me, right? They don't deserve any of this, right? Don't let those kinds of petty thoughts and fleeting feelings, right? These aren't feelings that we're going to have forever, make you do stupid things when it comes to trying to protect your business, right? Don't get sucked into making stupid long-term decisions about your business because your feelings are hurt right now, right? They're not going to be hurt forever, right? Lawyers will take your money to keep fighting stupid and pointless fights, right? You're paying them by the hour. So the stupider you get about non-important issues, the more they make, right? And do yourself a favor, right? Don't let your hurt feelings cloud your judgment, right? Be ready to sacrifice other assets of your marriage to keep 100% interest in your business, right? That's how you make money. That's how you're going to survive post-divorce, right? That's where we're going to focus our attention, right? To help recover from divorce, right? Be ready, right? To do what you need to save your business, right? You can also buy out your spouse, right? At the end of the day, they want as much as possible to help start their own life. Consider buying out their share if you can find it in you if you can't find it in you, to sacrifice other assets to keep your business, right? Be ready to pay them. You can always sell the business and divide the proceeds, right? If you guys don't agree, the judge will do it, right? So it's in your best interest to come to a deal that you can live with without having a judge do it for you, right? Because if the judge does it, you're not going to be happy with how the judge divides it, right? So these are what you have to look forward to. If you don't do what you need to when you're first married or first starting a business, to protect it in the long run, right? And protecting your business in the long run, protects everybody, right? It protects you, it protects your spouse, it protects your spouse from liability, let's say you own a used tire shop, and I had a client in this situation. You own a used tire shop, and my client was just running it as a DBA, right? An assumed name. They didn't have an LLC, they didn't have members, right? Nothing. And unfortunately, one of the tires they sold, despite warning the customer to the contrary, it was a used tire, right? It was a used tire shop. They knew what they were doing. It's just supposed to get you, right, from the used tire shop to, a discount tire where you can buy a brand new tire, right? Or the dealership so you can get a brand new tire, right? This guy buys this used tire. He goes on a trip, from Mathis to San Antonio. He hits some construction on the side of the road, and the tire bursts, and he's pretty hurt, right? This woman didn't set up any protections for herself when she started that business. They just started, a used tire shop, and she was sued. But not only was she sued, her husband was sued, right? And not only were they sued, their business was sued as well, right? So the DBA and both of them personally, right? With a little bit of planning up front at the beginning, they could have had something in place that maybe she couldn't have, kept herself protected, right? But she could have protected her husband from being sucked into this lawsuit, right? So planning at the beginning, and we've talked about it over several presentations, right? Planning at the beginning really does a lot to help your business in the long run, right? And in the case of a potential divorce, right? These are the things you have to look forward to, right? You're going to have to spend money to get this business valued, right? Not only that, but now you have someone prying into your finances, right? Prying into every part of your business, right? You might lose other things you would otherwise have been entitled to had you set up your business to protect it in the case of divorce later, right? And you might have to shell out a bunch of money to an ex, right? Because we didn't protect it up front. And we might just lose the business altogether. Divorces are messy and divorces are hard. And no one is ever happy at the end of a divorce, right? And you might end up having to lose your business altogether, right? So those are some things to keep in mind, right? No one gets married thinking that they'll ever be divorced, right? And I hope for everyone and for myself, right, that doesn't happen. But protecting your business at the get-go protects the business for you, your spouse, and your kids later on. And so that's all I have for you today, right? It's the end, right? It's not the end of your marriage, right? Protecting yourself, getting a prenup, getting a postnup should not destroy your marriage, right? It's business, and in business, we need to protect ourselves and protect it. So, as always, if you have any questions, right, you feel free to send them to me anytime. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And with that, Dustin?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adelita. That was a wonderful presentation, and thank you for going in so in depth with everything. I'm checking Eventbrite, and I don't see any questions on that end, and there's nothing in Zoom. So I think we are all good. Thank you so much for your time today.
Dustin, thank you. I always enjoy it.
Well, I will see you next week. Thank you so much, Adelita.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.